curious, how many of you have seen the show The Lowdown? All right, quite a few people. All right, quite a few. It's the latest production of the renowned Oklahoma and Native American screenwriter and director Sterling Harjo. Yes. You can applaud Sterling. Anytime you can applaud Sterling Harjo. The show is based on the late Leroy Chapman, who was an eccentric guy who cared deeply about Tulsa and about truth and about justice. In the show, they call him a truth historian because he wanted to expose the hidden truths about Tulsa history, particularly about prominent families that were lauded as the important people in the community who may not have had such a glorious history, but what was unknown. He owned a used bookstore and he was a freelance journalist. And so I'm going to show you a clip in just a second, just a short 2-minute clip from the show. And in it, you'll see the little girl behind him. That's his daughter. He's got joint custody. He's divorced. He's got joint custody. She's trying to figure out who he is. She adores him and wants to be a part of his life. But of course, a lot of his choices put her in jeopardy because he's out there exposing powerful people. So anyway, check out this clip and we'll go from there.
Ray, don't walk away from me. Come on.
Why do you need those books so bad anyway?
I don't need the books. I need what is inside the books.
Oh, that might be the most pretentious thing you ever said. Are you okay? You got a fever?
Look, you're gonna lead me to Dale's killer, okay? I mean, I'm the furthest one to want to spread a rumor, but you know your friend Frank Martin, okay, at Akron?
What about him?
Yeah, all right, well, he knows Donald Washburn.
Everybody knows Donald Washburn.
Yeah, political influencers, corporate raiders know Donald Washburn.
Frank Martin plays golf and drinks tawny port. He's just another born rich.
And he hires murderous ex-con skinheads, all right? Didn't know that. Alan Murphy, Ginger, murderer.
It's the guy at the store?
Okay, you're not supposed to be listening. Stop listening.
What?
Don't listen, all right?
Believe me, I made a point a long time ago never to listen to your daddy.
Yeah, all right, and I'm the only one who ever tells you the truth. What does that say about you?
I never should have put you in that room with Frank. Oh, and you're one to talk about rough company. I thought you'd be into second chances for lowly ex-cons, considering you're one yourself.
It's okay, Dad. I know you went to jail. Mom told me.
What, she told you that?
I overheard her talking to Johnny.
Oh, great. She told Johnny that.
She said it was a week.
Yeah, it was 4 days, all right, and a morning.
Okay, she didn't say what you did.
Lord, I went and done it now.
Jail's not as bad as you think, all right? There's a lot of good people in jail. Nelson Mandela, Muhammad Ali, Martin Luther King.
Okay, so great black men of history?
All right, Merle Haggard, Chet Baker, Oscar Wilde.
Charles Manson.
If you don't go to jail, you're doing it wrong, okay?
For Christ's
Except
sake.
you. I went to jail so you don't have to.
No, he's Jesus now.
The point is, don't listen to anyone, especially men in power.
Or crazy women in Tahlequah.
Yeah, or crazy women in
All right,
Tahlequah.
goodbye now.
So Time Magazine had an article about this and explained that one of the questions that viewers have to decide as they're watching The Lowdown is Lee Raybone a righteous crusader for truth and justice or a dangerously delusional white savior? Now, the first time I ever met Leroy Chapman, who the show is based on, was in 2010 at the very first John Hope Franklin Symposium for Reconciliation here in Tulsa. There was a speech at the symposium that was open to the entire community. It was set at lunchtime so people could come during their lunch hour, even if they weren't part of the symposium. And there were probably 500, maybe 600 people in the auditorium for this speech. And these people came from all over the country to this symposium. You had professors and all kinds of folks doing good work around. And then you had a lot of prominent Tulsans who came to be there as well and who were part of this symposium. So when it came time at the end of the speech for questions and answers, this 40-something-year-old man came bursting in from the back of the auditorium. He looked scraggly. He was wearing a hat. He was unkempt, long hair, a beard, and wrinkly, loose-fitting clothes. And he asked a question. It was a complete non sequitur for the speech that we had just heard. He said, when are we going to acknowledge that Tate Brady was a notorious racist and stop putting his name all over things and stop glorifying him? Yes. So everybody in the crowd immediately turned around to see who was speaking. And Leroy was also holding a bag of buttons that had the name Tate Brady and a line crossing it out. And he started handing them out to the crowd. Now, it felt like an interruption rather than an actual question. It made everybody feel uncomfortable. The decorum of this sophisticated intellectual symposium and lecture was interrupted. The person giving the lecture wasn't even from Tulsa, had no idea who Tate Brady was or what this question was about or how to answer it, but that clearly was not Leroy's point. He wasn't asking the question to the speaker. He was positing it for all the people from Tulsa who were leading the symposium, who were heading up the John Hope Franklin Center, and those Tulsa intellectuals and professional class who had come to attend this talk. There was an uncomfortable response from the podium, and Leroy shouted out a few more statements and questions, and his whole vibe in that moment could be boiled down to the 4 words on the back of his van that said, "You're doing it wrong." And then he just kept handing out his buttons, and someone else asked another question, and the symposium continued. And I thought to myself, who is this guy? He seemed like a radical, and he was engaging in some guerrilla activism all by himself. Now, I'd never heard anything about the background of Tate Brady before that. But for the next couple of years, thanks to Leroy, the city of Tulsa began a debate about the name Tate Brady and his legacy. A little over a year later, I was invited to be on a panel hosted by This Land Press at the Greenwood Cultural Center about Tate Brady. Now, most people don't remember, but what's now known as Guthrie Green and the Tulsa Arts District were originally planned to be called Brady Park and the Brady District. Probably the best restaurant in the area was called the Brady Tavern. Now, I posed the question on the panel, now if I were to invite an African-American friend to join me for a beer at the Brady Tavern, would that be like inviting a Jewish person to a tavern named after Hitler? Now, it was provocative. In fact, a few days later, a mutual friend had to arrange a breakfast summit with me and the owner of the Brady Tavern because he'd heard that I'd called his restaurant, equated it with Hitler. So in the end, the Brady Tavern changed its name to The Tavern. Brady Park changed its name to Guthrie Green. The Brady District was renamed the Arts District, and the Brady Theater became Tulsa Theater. But the lamest response was from the City Council of Tulsa, who didn't rename Brady Street, but only changed the initials in front of the name and pretended it was named after a Civil War photographer who has the same last name, Brady, who has absolutely no connection to Tulsa. But Leroy Chapman's campaign was victorious. The city of Tulsa had a reckoning of sorts, and thanks to him and This Land Presses, which in 2011 published an article that forced this issue, we had this reckoning, and things did change due to his guerrilla activism and his efforts. Now, there were moments while watching the Lowdown when I see Lee Rayburn, as he's known, this well-intentioned white man charging in to fix things that others got wrong, and I feel a knot in my stomach. Not because he's so bad, but because I see myself. A well-meaning activist who has sometimes been blinded by my own self-righteousness and my own sense of justice. At times, I could rightly be accused of having a white savior complex. Now, I realize that you might not think of yourself as a savior, But all of us, parents, activists, helpers, clergy, volunteers, friends, know what it feels like to want to fix, to rescue, to swoop in, to think that we know what's best for our child, our community, our family. In the series, The Lowdown, Leroy believes that he knows who the bad guy is, and he believes that he's helping. He believes that he sees the whole picture and no one else does, and he knows that they're doing it wrong. He believes that his good intentions entitle him to lead, and yet time after time, his actions create new complications, not only for him, but also for the people he's trying to help. Sterling Harjo gives us a character who mirrors a deep truth. Good intentions can become problematic when they're untethered from humility. Harjo paints a picture showing the fine line between heroes and villains, and how good intentions can sometimes put other people we love and who we think that we're helping at risk. I was talking to a colleague, for example, in Illinois last week. He's from Chicago, and he wants to preach and he wants to protest what's happening with the ICE raids in his city. However, his wife is an immigrant from Mexico, and they have 2 biracial children. And last week, he witnessed a man a block from his house being dragged off of a work site by ICE agents in masks. And this week, a woman's car window was broken open by ICE agents, and the woman was dragged out of the car in front of her child in his neighborhood. My colleague's wife has asked him not to be out front on this issue for her safety and for the safety of their children. He's conflicted. I was reminded of what happened in 2010 when the minister of All Souls Partner Church in Uganda reached out to me because his government had proposed a law that was being called the Kill the Gays bill. It was proposing to make homosexuality capital crime, punishable by death, and also to make it a felony for anyone who knows someone else is gay and does not turn them in to the authorities. So our partner church minister was organizing a conference to protest the bill. He explained that there had been other protests over the years in support of the LGBT rights community there, and people had been killed and disappeared by the government, and one conference was bombed. He said he'd like me to come to speak at the conference because having an American there would make it much less likely that the conference would be attacked and the people disappeared. You can imagine the conversations my wife Anitra and I had about whether I should go. I did go, and the conference went off without any violence or trouble. But this was just 4 years after my wife and I and our son lost our daughter Sienna. And had something happened to me, it would have been devastating for my wife and for my son. The bill was ultimately defeated in Uganda, but not because of our conference, because the Obama administration put pressure on the Ugandan government. Later that year, I received a humanitarian award from the Unitarian Universalist United Nations office. The community here honored me by making me the Grand Marshal of the Pride Parade that year. I'm glad I went, especially since nobody got hurt, but in hindsight, I have to question my decision. There have been other times in my ministry when I thought I was helping a situation by stepping in, only to realize that I'd centered myself instead of the people actually affected. So some years before, when I was helping to lead the charge among Tulsa Metropolitan Ministries for reparations for the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, our denominational magazine decided to write a story about the work that I was involved in. They interviewed me, and I told them about the work that I was doing and how we had collected offerings both in this congregation and in congregations of many denominations and religions across the city, and that we had sent checks for the first time to the living survivors on behalf of the Tulsa community. And then a few months later, I was going to the General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalists, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. I was excited to see some of my African-American colleagues and those who had taught me about doing racial justice work as a minister. And so I was really surprised when an elder of that community sat me down and was upset with me. I think he even used the words white savior. He reminded me of the legacy of people like the Reverend Charles Yobonzi Johnson and the Reverend Chester McCall and the Reverend Gerald Davis, 3 black colleagues from the Church of the Restoration Unitarian Universalist in Greenwood, who'd been doing the work of racial reconciliation in Greenwood for decades, long before I'd ever arrived. The denominational magazine made it sound like I was the lone hero in the story that led the way, making invisible the courageous and hard-fought battles of those who had come before. I learned something from that, and I've tried to do better, to listen to others, to give the credit where credit is due, and to remember that real change isn't created by any heroic individual. Real transformation comes from communities working together. And if I'm doing the work to make myself feel good rather than for the good of the cause, then I'm not really helping. Now, a colleague of mine in Tulsa who I think is really good at this is the Reverend Chris Moore of Fellowship Congregational Church. He does a lot of organizing for justice in this community, and he often remains behind the scenes. He does a great job of elevating other people's voices. On more than one occasion, he's given me the microphone because he thought that my voice would be more impactful, even though he was the one who made the whole event happen. I've learned a lot from the example of quality people like the Reverend Chris Moore in our community. But this isn't a message about me, and this isn't even a message about Leroy Chapman or the fabulous television series as much as it is a message about all of us. The problem with being the hero is that everyone else becomes a supporting character. And the people that we most want to help can become invisible or sometimes even get hurt. What Sterling Harjo shows us in the Lowdown is how our attempts to help can sometimes escalate the conflict. Sometimes when we attempt to help others, we're really looking for absolution for ourselves or putting ourselves at the center. Real transformation comes from empowering others and working in partnership, not from heroes. With everything happening in our country right now, the threats to our democracy, the violent raids upon immigrants and American citizens, it's important that we remember that we're not going to be saved by a hero. What's going to preserve our democracy and restore our nation's humanity is going to be everybody working together and each of us shining our own light. The hero complex comes from a good place, of course, wanting to help others, wanting to do our part. But it's the story of partnership that truly liberates and transforms. Perhaps the spiritual practice that we all need to employ is the decentering of the Savior in ourselves and in our society. There's a saying, if you're not living the problem, you should not be leading the solution. We have to always check our motives by asking, is this about helping someone else or about repairing the way I feel? Now, I'm not suggesting false modesty. It's about right-sizing ourselves with the greater whole. Saviors try to act while servants seek to learn. And in the Christian Gospels, of course, Jesus talks a lot about serving others and being a servant and how the last shall be first and the first shall be last. I see now how being a servant leader is a lot better than trying to be a hero. Now, where do you show up as a hero? In what relationships do you try to control instead of empower? As a parent or with your siblings, do you like to jump in and fix things, to be the savior, to tell them you're doing it wrong, instead of encouraging your children or others to to talk to each other directly and find ways to work it out themselves. Sometimes we do it because it feels easier than the slow, unpredictable process of letting others grow. Because transformation often happens in the uncomfortable space when we stop intervening. In religious language, we would say God works in the messiness. We got to let people have their messiness and not try to be the hero and save them. In your volunteer work, do you let other people in? Or are you the one who always plans the big event? Do you think, let me do it, no one else does it right? Leaving younger or newer members feeling shut out or unseen or untrusted. Sometimes volunteer work can become a stage for someone's ego rather than a place for shared transformation. If you are caring for an aging parent, are you the sibling who insists on doing everything because no one else can take care of mom like I can? Handling all the appointments and the medications and the finances until you become burnt out and resentful. Caring is a form of love until our need to be the hero robs others of the chance to love too. A servant leader doesn't say, do it this way, I know best. They say, how can I support you in doing what you think is right? When we care for our elders, the move is from I'll make the decisions to let's decide together and let's share the load. In justice work, moving from you're doing it wrong to let me tell you what needs to happen into how can I follow the leadership of those who are most impacted. It's also about being clear when it's time for us to step back and to allow someone else to rise. The good news, the lowdown, if you will, is that we do not have to save the world alone. Not our nation, not our city, not our family. We don't need to be heroes. In fact, it's better for everyone when we don't. We do the most when we listen and we learn and we love the people around us, when we walk together, because true transformation never comes from a hero riding in, it comes from communities rising up, and it's time to rise up. Yes, you can applaud that. We each carry a light. Small or bright, steady or flickering, but it's ours. Each of us is a star in the vast human galaxy, shining with brilliance that no one else can offer. But hear this, we don't have to be the star of the show. Transformation is not a solo performance, it's a constellation that we create together. So let your light shine. Not to be the hero, and not because you have to earn your worth, but because shining is what you were meant to do. Know how much you matter. Know that your light is real. Know that it's needed. So stop cursing the darkness and stop waiting for someone else to carry the torch. Turn on your light. And if we all do this, and if we all dare to shine at the same time, the darkness doesn't stand a chance. I say to Leroy Chapman, take a bow, my friend. Your light is growing years after you are gone. Thank you. I am light, 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 light.